non-binary sentient life forms. I am Charles, your instigator of literary productivity from Full Coverage Writers. Our booth is like 20 feet off that a ways, maybe 25. I'm coming to you today to talk about not only courting your muse, but also warping the fabric of reality itself so you can find time to write, or just be creative in general, because even writers like to do more than just write. We have all sorts of tips and tricks and methods for kind of curating your ideas and figuring out how to flesh them out, how to handle them, how to work with them on the fly, because they don't always come at scheduled times or when it's convenient, as we all know way too well. And also some methods for figuring out how to make the time to be creative, or how to restructure or reprioritize your days to find time where you can write or be creative or work on whatever you want. Global domination, whatever. But first, let's deal with the whole concept of actually curating all of your ideas, because that's really where it all boils down to at first. If you have plenty of time to write but no ideas, what good is that? So let's figure out the ideas at first. The first one we have is act like a child. Why? Because when we're born, every one of us is a creative genius in some way, shape, or form. As children, imagination and creativity are natural to us because we don't have any preconceived ideas or references to what is possible, what is not, what exactly am I capable of doing. Granted, as a child, that can be dangerous because we are not indestructible, but there are aspects of that that we can utilize as adults. We don't have to act like adults, but we are adults. We can utilize it. So, because children are intrinsically creative, I mean, they can look at a cardboard box. It can be a rocket ship. It can be a castle. It can be a tunnel. It can just be a cardboard box if that's what you need at the time. But there's no limits. You're not going to stop and say, that's stupid. Let's go back to something normal. It gives you a chance to just do whatever you want with your imagination and have fun with it. Just go all out, no holds barred. You can get playful with it. I mean, there are various toys and games. You can try some puzzles just to get the creative juices flowing. Anyone ever play with Legos? You can do an infinite amount with Legos. Just pick them up off the floor afterwards. No one likes stepping on those. They're not exactly pleasant. And do something that can involve all of your senses, because, I mean, being able to touch the toys and puzzles and whatnot, or just seeing stuff, okay, you got 2 out of your 5 senses, but what about playing with stuff like Play-Doh or something that's a little more scented? I don't know if they're still around, but, I mean, back in my childhood, we had scented markers that theoretically smelled like what the markers claimed they were, like grape and lemon and lime and all those silly things. Get all of your senses going. The taste one is a little tricky unless you're playing with cooking, I would think. I mean, you don't really want to be eating Play-Doh or trying to chew on a Lego or anything like that. You can, but I personally, and on recording, do not recommend it. And really, just for acting like a child, go for it. Just give it a shot. It may sound weird. It may feel a little awkward. You don't have to do it in front of people. You don't have to do it in front of a recording. But just give it a shot. Because sometimes the unexpected things can really just kick off an idea or make connections in your mind. Like, oh, I had this idea from years ago, and now this experience really tied it together to this. So now, after all these years, they can tie together, and I can work on it now, finally. And the next one, one of the biggest ones that I've seen with a lot of writers and just creative people in general, is face your fear. We're all afraid of something, sometimes multiple things. In regards to creativity and like writing in general, the biggest one I've seen is fear of failure. No one likes to fail. Just no one. It's not fun. And we're all afraid of failing at one point or another because, well, if we're going into unexplored territory, like all right, I have this novel, but I've never written a novel before. Well, it's unexplored territory. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. What if I do it wrong? Well, there are good ways or effective ways of pulling a novel together, but there's no real wrong way. So you shouldn't be afraid of failing before you actually try, because you have to at least try. Try writing, try being creative, try illustrating or playing with Play Doh, Legos. Just keep at it. Not because, oh, well, I'm not that good at it, or what if I fail? What if it's going to suck? No one's fantastic at anything the first time around. Beginner's luck doesn't really factor into anything like this. This is an ongoing skill that people evolve and revise over time. I mean, I was not a fantastic writer by any means, and to a degree, I still feel that way. But like my 8-year-old self, when I said I'm going to be a writer, I don't want to look at that writing anymore. That stuff was terrifyingly bad because, well, it took me a while to get to where I am now. And yeah, I had mistakes here and there, but you learn from the mistakes. You figure out how to better yourself over time. Like, oh well, this didn't work. The characters were a bit flat. Well, okay, try and add some more depth to them, or next time around in a different story or draft, okay, let's tighten this up, or ooh, I didn't get to play with this last time because it didn't work in that genre, but maybe over here it can work. Uh, the exact opposite of fear of failure, fear of success. Well, what if I make something and it's actually good and it picks up and it takes off? How do I beat that? What if that's the best I do? Uh, I've had moments of that, but mostly as a teenager because I was a teenager. Of course, I'm the best. Why wouldn't I be? But uh, the success or fear of it really has a lot of tricky things that people have to overcome. Like, uh, the best way to go about it is really, let's see what the notes were. A lot of that, for both fear of success and fear of failure, a lot of it comes from like your own inner monologue, really, of like, well, I'm afraid of if I succeed, well, how do I beat that? Or what if I fail? A lot of that's internal. There are ways to just shut that off or shut that voice up over time or just ignore it and just keep on plowing through with what you're trying to do and becoming better over time. Uh, some ways of trying to speed that up is if you're writing for a first draft or something like that, you can be the hero of your own story. You can try inserting yourself. I know a lot of people say, don't do that, never do that, don't self-insert. But if it's the first draft, or as I like to call it, the crap draft, if that's what you need to do to get things rolling and get the story moving, if it takes putting yourself in it and, well, what would I do in this type of situation? And then you keep going with it, then by all means do that. Whatever it takes to get the words down on the initial draft, by all means go for it. Because the revision can come later. The editing and tweaking, if it doesn't make the next draft, it's fine, it's acceptable, but get the words down first before you start trying to tweak everything. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's why it's called a crap draft. Because the first draft is never that good. It's just your basic outline. You're trying to get everything down. You can clean it up, polish it, make it look all nice and shiny afterwards. There's an infinite amount of time, but you got to put it down on paper first. Let's see. The next one would be think outside the box. Now, I don't have a box here conveniently for reference, but everyone's heard the phrase. As a group, why did I write that? That's silly. As like humans, we generally are pattern seeking. We like to tie things together and make things have some sense of order. And generally, the way we do that is following by example. We look at what's already out there in the world, what have people used in the past to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and then we just follow that because that's what they did. Why not me? Not not every process works for every person. Every writer is different. Every creative person is different. We all have our unique styles and talents and skills and abilities and weaknesses and quirks that are sometimes hard to overcome. So while you can look at the patterns that have already been created, make your own spin on it. See what's out there, what worked for some, and say, well, I kind of like this part, but I don't know about this part. What if I tweaked it and used my own style? Or, well, I'm not really comfortable with this, or going out and trying to talk to people to get interesting conversation ideas for my characters, but what if I did this method? It's okay to deviate from what is considered the societal norm, because the societal norm is continuously shifting and evolving hourly, especially now with the digital era. So also don't go back to like, well, Shakespeare did it this way. Well, Shakespeare lived a long time ago and things were a lot different back then. They were even using Middle English, not modern English. So if you want to evolve certain styles or character depth or character arcs like that, fantastic. But do not copy or mimic. See what you enjoy or what you appreciate and then make it your own. And use questions that shake your mind free of expectations. If you could read your finished story, how would it go? It doesn't have to follow a particular pattern that's already been created. You can just say, well, here's a character, or here's where I start. What's the end game? Or if you have the end game, well, what was the instigating inspiration for all of this? You don't have to map out everything in between right then and there, but if you ask yourselves the questions, like, well, what would happen? Sorry. And if you actually do it out loud, sometimes it can help trigger your own internal monologue to actually provide an answer. Like, gee, this character's being really stubborn right now. I don't know what I want to do. Well, sometimes your mind will trigger, well, here's a situation. What if they did this? And then you can run and riff off of that. And another style that people have utilized is if you've visited the future and looked back on your past, what would you want to see? Like, say 10 years from now, you could travel 10 years from now instantly. What would you see yourself as having accomplished? Like, what do you want to say to your future self? Like, hey, look at all the stuff I've done. Or like, well, I'm still rolling with this plot forever until the end of time itself. Sometimes that can provide a little bit of inspiration to actually get the ball rolling or keep the ball moving little by little. It doesn't have to be all at once. You don't have to marathon your writing sessions. You can do 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. And it can be like one day a week even, just little by little. As long as you keep working at it a little bit, or a lot, if you can, all the better. As long as you do something, that's the important part. As I wrote here, and then ignored, take things step by step. Even if you start, say, 1 hour tomorrow, and then you take a week and a half break, but then you start up again, you're still progressing. You don't have to feel guilty for stopping or taking a break or saying, well, gee, I haven't looked at it for 3 months. I don't know if I want to go back to it. Go back to it. Because as long as you keep trying, as long as you keep pushing, any bit of progress is worthwhile. Because even if you write a couple sentences, a couple paragraphs, that's still something you're adding to the story. That's something you're adding to your own personal experiences. It's a cumulative effect. It doesn't fade away into nothingness over time. You still retain that to some degree, even years down the line. So do yourselves favors and keep at it so that you can keep adding to your own experiences and knowledge and then come up with even more ideas that you can write. And of course, something that the education system could remember from time to time, there is no one right answer. There is no one perfect magical silver bullet that can say, here's what you do to write a novel and it'll be perfect. No. There's no magical method for that, just like there's no magical method for writing a perfect essay for class. Everyone has their own style, everyone has their own quirks, everyone has their own methods for putting something together. As long as you can pull a story together and convey what you want to your readers, you've done your job. That takes practice and effort and takes time because you're always learning and becoming better and refining your own style. But there's no magical method that you need to learn or pay attention to or say, well, my teacher said do it this way, so I'll do it this way even though I don't like it. Find your own style. And something I've learned, your style will change over time, or at least it has for me. So what your style is now may eventually shift a couple years or decades down the line into something entirely different. If you go from short stories to novels or jump genres from time to time or different narration styles, it's all good. And it's not bad to change styles if you want to play around with something or just see how it works, by all means. As I said, there is no perfect way. So even if you find what you feel is a perfect way right now, you might find something you enjoy even more later on that's more relevant for that time and your efforts in the future. It really all boils down to know what works for you. Because a creative person can create under any circumstances. You're going to find ideas pretty much anywhere at any given time. There's not going to be much warning usually when it happens. You could be walking through the dealer's room and just get an idea because there's a lot of idea content over there to be had. So some things to keep in mind for trying to figure out what works for you. Location. Where are you most creative? Like, where do you get the most ideas that you like to work with? Is it inconveniently in the shower because there's no other distractions other than water, whether hot or cold? There are various products out there where you can use like a dry erase type board in the shower if you need a quick note, or some people have actually used like voice recorders on your on the bathroom sink. Just press record, and if an idea comes to mind in the shower, I have this great idea. I'm going to say it out loud so that I can pop it in my computer in half an hour and then flesh it out. I'm a little wary of that one because there's a lot of humidity in a bathroom, and it is kind of electrical equipment that can be somewhat expensive depending on the model, but some people have used it. I can't speak towards it.
Waterproof dry erase board?
Yeah, waterproof dry erase board. That's the easier method. Preferably one that you can take on and off the wall, I guess, so that you can copy down the notes later. Not just suction cup, because maybe that can be a little tricky. Another thing would be sound effects. Do you have any audio triggers for ideas? Like, if you're more of a musician, perhaps. What sort of sound effects or musical sound bites or just overheard conversations catch your interest and your internal eye and like, gee, that was an unusual comment. I wonder what the context was for that. Well, you can just riff off of that and create all sorts of interesting stories. We have an ongoing trend every once in a while of random overheard quotes of the day. Usually in Manhattan, because it's Manhattan, there's everything. But some of the best overheard quotes we've had have been just walking down the street and we'd stop like, what? And a big thing that a lot of us really need to keep in mind for a lot of these activities is relax. We are a very stressful society, myself included, usually more so than necessary. You do need to relax every once in a while. If ideas really aren't coming, if various techniques just don't seem to be working, or you're getting frustrated trying to pound something out, it's not the end of the world. Just take a break, walk away, take some time, have a cup of decaf tea, or whatever you appreciate. I personally do not recommend decaf coffee because I do not believe that to be a legitimate beverage, but that's just my personal opinion. But taking a nap, taking a break, meditating is great. I'm horrible at it, but I've heard wonderful things about art creative people who have utilized that method. Just let it rest sometimes. Sometimes your ideas need time to stew and percolate. You don't have to try and push them out. That said, if you do need to try and push them out, if you're working on a deadline or for a job or something like that, a lot of us eventually over time have rituals or triggers. And I know that sounds a little cultish, but we do all have these little internal habits that we happen to have before we're creating an idea or thinking about an idea or just being contemplative. I know for me, I'm either playing with this, thinking of an idea, because this is a representation of my muse, or now I'm spinning my ring because it's something to keep my fingers busy while my internal cogs just keep rotating. If you can become aware of what your triggers are, every once in a while you can use that to kind of trigger unintentional or intentionally trigger some ideas like, gee, I really need to figure these things out. Well, every time I get good ideas, I do something like this. Maybe it can be kind of like the Pavlov's bell scenario of, well, if I keep doing this long enough unintentionally, if I do it intentionally, it might help. Kind of an odd parallel to Pavlov's bell experiment, but still, I like the scenario. And having captured all of your ideas or gotten time to be creative, theoretically you've gotten time to actually do all of these crazy scenarios and activities, but if you actually need to figure out time, like, gee, I work 2 jobs, I'm taking night classes, and I'm going to conventions, running panels, running around like a headless chicken all the time, how am I going to find time to write? Obviously not about me. We have all sorts of methods that we've compiled that some I have found more effective than others, and other people have like sworn by some of these, so take these as you will. The first one that we had was time is a gift, not a chore. This one is more mindset oriented because some people think of writing or being creative in general as a chore. Like, I gotta fit this into my schedule, I already got so much I gotta do today. It's not a chore, it should be a gift. It should be something that you enjoy and appreciate and are entertained by. It shouldn't be something that you dread or have to try and squeeze in. So this one's really more of a mindset thing than actually saying, well, I'm going to write now, whether I like it or not. But it can be helpful if you have just, say, 15 minutes out of a day. Say, I'm going to try and be creative for 15 minutes. I'm going to give myself this time. I can turn off the internet if I'm good about that. I can shut my phone off if I'm good about that. Say, tell everyone around me, leave me the heck alone. I'm going to be creative. Even if you only come up with one idea or one sentence or one character concept in that 15 minutes, it is time well spent. But trying to do so means you have to gift yourself that time. Don't just shoehorn it in. Actually say, all right, I'm doing 50 things today. I deserve 15 minutes to just do this, do my own thing, in my own time, in my own space. And anyone who distracts me is going to get smacked upside the head. That said, time also requires sacrifice sometimes. Because everyone is doing 50 things in a day, usually, we all are multitaskers nowadays, sometimes you have to actually drop something out of your schedule to fit in creative time. One of the easier ways of doing this is some of the easy stuff like television time, video gaming time. Yeah, I'm just as guilty. Or just trying to do 20 errands in a day. Sometimes you really don't have to do 20 a day. Sometimes it can be 10 or 15 if you really need to, but try and space things out a little differently so that, all right, I'm going to sacrifice one show, or I'll just have it on in the background. I'm not going to devote my entire attention to this, and then spend that time figuring out this one scene or poking this character with a pointy stick until they actually do what I want them to do. I found that 30 minutes is the ideal time to really start that method because trying to devote an hour to anything nowadays is increasingly difficult. But 30 minutes seems to be a little more adaptable. It doesn't have to be on the hour. It can just be like, oh, it's 12:37. Let's do 30 minutes right now. It doesn't have to be that scheduled or anything. It can just be like, oh, I have 30 minutes that I don't really need to do anything at the moment. I can shove things around. I can make it work. Let's just play with these ideas now. Conversely, sacrifices are for volcanoes. Yeah, you don't always have to sacrifice time. Sometimes you can actually just cut time out of your schedule entirely. There are some activities out there where I really don't need to do, or I can have someone else do. I can delegate. And then, hey, I have freed up time. It's not a sacrifice because either it was unnecessary in the first place, or someone else can cover it or fill in for me for half an hour to an hour or whatever. It's good to have an idea of, okay, well, what am I getting out of the way? You have to be aware of that. It's not just, I'm going to write for 30 minutes now, and then realize, oh, I missed something. I probably should have done that. But I mean, things like this can be squeezed in. Like if you have 15 minutes even between errands or picking up significant others or siblings or kids or whatever during various events or whatnot, if you have even 15 minutes, all it takes is like a little notebook. Doesn't take much. I usually have one in one of my pockets. If you have a purse or messenger bag or something, you can do something a little bigger than this, so you have a little more space. But it also then helps to have a writing implement. But like I said earlier, ideas can happen at any given time, at any given place. Creativity time can happen at any given time, at any given place. So have the materials on hand so that they can be available to you when you have the time or can make the time. The next one up is tick-tock, stop the clock. Now, rather than actually freezing time, because that never ends well in any science fiction book, as we all know, the key to this one is scheduling. Some of us are better at figuring out schedules than others. I have my moments, but I'm not a big fan of them because I'm not very good with specific timing. I'm somewhat vague, like, oh, it's around 3-ish, give or take. I don't really like exact timing. So scheduling for me is a little more anomalous, but it does help to kind of go through your day mentally of like, all right, I have these 5 things. One of them's in the morning at this time maybe, or just I got to do it in the morning. And then figure out, okay, I got some time in between. Maybe I can work on a story or an idea then. Or no, I'm in meetings all day, or I have a day job. So these entire blocks of time are a no-go. It's good to be aware of what time you're utilizing while conscious. Don't count sleep time, because no one has gotten the trick of writing while sleeping down yet, or being creative while sleeping, not counting dreams and whatnot. So just be aware of your conscious moments and figuring out, well, can I structure these to some degree and say like, well, now I have half an hour, or I have 17 and a half minutes, because that's what it would boil down to, or whatever. You don't even have to know the exact numbers. Most of the time you won't. Just be aware of moments where, okay, I don't have anything demanding. I can play with this, or I want to fit this in between this and that. Go on, come on in. And make the time in between everything and make it work. One of the easiest methods I've seen for this for myself is disconnecting from virtual reality. I disconnect from reality easily enough, but virtual reality, so pull out the Ethernet plug, shut down your Wi-Fi, turn off your phone entirely. Don't just put it on vibrate. Don't just put it on silent. Turn it off. Close the door, shove everyone away. Just disconnect from everything that is not part of your creative process and give it a shot. You can do it for 15 minutes if that's all you're comfortable with. It can be very hard to leave like the phone down or be disconnected entirely from everything. But give it a shot for even 15 minutes, because then you have an entirely devoted 15 minutes to just being creative. There's going to be no distractions, and it's going to take time to turn everything back on afterwards. So there will be a nice transition period to go back to being connected to everything. But it is useful to just set a time aside where I'm not going to be able to be distracted by anything because everything is off. You can leave lights on if it's getting dark. That's okay. I don't recommend using candles, but that's because I am very clumsy, as my friends well know with our booth and coffee. Thankfully, not as burnable as candles. If you are, however, one who generally types on a computer, then try and do if it's not on like Google Drive or an online service, at least unplug the internet, because it is very easy to get distracted on the internet. Just unplugging it or turning off the Wi-Fi, whichever works, can be very helpful. If you do use websites like Google Drive or online services for typing up all your stuff, only have that tab open, nothing else. Unless you have a very important reference site that you need to utilize for whatever purposes you're working on at the moment, then okay. And then I completely contradict myself with my further note of you're allowed to have YouTube open for musical inspiration only. If you need some sort of background music or something, YouTube or Groove Shark, SoundCloud, those sites can be useful for providing just a streaming radio style content. So you're not going to be poking at iTunes every moment like, oh, I don't like this song, skip it. No, set up some sort of radio or randomized system so you are not going to be poking at it for 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever. The less distractions you have to focus on, the better. And if you do happen to miss an important email or something going on because you've shut yourself off, well, that's the way life is sometimes. We don't have to be connected 100% 24/7, 7 days a week. We are allowed downtime. I personally give you permission to have downtime. If anyone complains, you can just send them to me. Preferably through my email so I can ignore it. My personal favorite method for trying to figure out your day is percentageizing your day. And yes, that is a word now, because I say so. So how do you percentageize your day? Yeah, I can't even say it. Well, think about it this way. You have 24 hours in a regular day. Most people agree with that. I mean, calendar systems are a bit funky depending on where you go, but most people say 24 hours in a day. If you were to take, let's see, 10 minutes, that is approximately 0.7% of your day. So say if you want to be creative and you only have 10 minutes, admittedly, that's not a big percentage of your day, but it is something that you can afford to take. Because, I mean, it's not even 1% of your day. You should be able to take it 1% of your day to do whatever you like, whatever you please. Take 1% of your day. Be creative. Work on a story, work on some art, play with Legos or Play-Doh, or both. Whatever works for you. If you were to up that percentage to, say, 5%, seems like a manageable percentage, one would think. That's only 72 minutes. A little bit over an hour. But if you were to use 5% of your day across an entire year or so, I do not actually have that percentage because I used a different one. If you were to use 30 minutes a day, because that's kind of a happy medium between 10 minutes and 72, and 30 minutes nice and easy to remember. That would equate to 182 hours in a year, or 7.6 days. 30 minutes a day, and you would get over a week's worth of pure creativity time in a year. That feels like a nice, solid number that you can play with, and it's encouraging to think, well, if I were to do the 72 minutes, so like 5% in a day, that more than doubles that. So you'd have probably 2.5 weeks of creative time in a year, just of being creative. That's the type of numbers and percentages that I can toss in my head and say, like, gee, a week or 2 weeks just of pure creativity in a year, I should be able to manage that. I'm going to try and focus on, okay, let's do a half an hour here, and then maybe another 40 minutes or so in the evening when I have another moment. Like, it's a little encouraging to think that it doesn't really take that much to add up over time. And there's always time to take time for guilty pleasures, because we all have guilty pleasures. And some of us have non-guilty pleasures. But sometimes it is useful to not just sit down and stare at a blank piece of paper or stare at a story that you've been poking at forever. Sometimes it is useful to actually just go watch a show that you've been meaning to catch up on. Yes, I know, completely contradictory to what I've said earlier, but every writer is different, every creative person is different. Again, it takes all styles. Sometimes it helps to just play a video game for a little while to decompress or just get your mind off of what you're trying to get through. Sometimes your brain just does need time to process behind the scenes what you were working on, so distract it by doing other stuff that you've been wanting to do. Now, the good person's method of this would be, okay, well, how about I do the dishes finally? Or, well, this room is getting pretty dusty and I think there's something staring at me from under the bookshelf. Maybe I should clean this area a little bit. Sometimes you can take those 15, 20, 30 minutes and just declutter your desk or your bookshelf, or take a moment to work on one area of your house to clean it up. Your productivity time does not have to necessarily be just sitting at a desk or whatever place you like and working on your story or creative idea. Sometimes just doing the more menial stuff, or just playing games, or catching a show, or even hanging out with friends can be just as beneficial. Because an important thing for writers and people in general is, as I said before, less stress. Chill out, relax. If you're getting all stressed up trying to make things work or squeezing in time to make a new story idea or character arcs or anything like that, step away, go play a game, go hang out with friends, because I'm sure they've been asking, where have you been? You just keep on saying, I have characters to play with. Come on. Go to a coffee shop or something. Go catch a movie. Whatever it takes. Sometimes it is useful to just take time and relax and have fun and do something else. Something a little trickier that I am very bad about is making yourself accountable. It's very easy to say, I am going to hold myself accountable for this story. I am going to spend 20 minutes and do this, or else. And then I'm on Tumblr for half an hour. Or I'm watching YouTube videos because they were there, and I didn't close them because I'm bad. Holding myself accountable and just telling myself, for some people that's enough. Sometimes that's all it takes, just saying, I'm going to do this. And to prove I'm going to do this, I'm going to actually do it, rather than just saying it, because talk is cheap. The alternative is actually holding yourself accountable by telling someone else. Like,
my cousin's writing a novel, and he said, if I don't finish this word count by this date, you come and kick me.
Yep.
He finished the words.
Yeah. We actually host a weekly podcast where we have regular goals and aspirations that we mention every week, and a lot of them have been like, I'm going to do this because I'm telling myself. I haven't really held myself accountable for others, or I haven't told others to hold myself accountable. Had I done that, I think I would have been a little more productive and accomplished, because I know these people will hold me accountable and mention every once in a while, so yeah, about that thing you said you were going to do. How's that going? As they see me playing Borderlands 2 or watching videos or something like that. Like, oh yeah, I guess I should do that. Oh, okay. But yeah, it's useful to have a friend or family member who you can tell, like, I really want to accomplish this, or for some of us, if we have deadlines that need to be made, if it's part of our jobs or freelancing or whatever, this needs to get done by this time. Tell someone about it. And tell them, like, if this doesn't get done by this date or this time, here's the consequence or repercussion. And they can hold you to that. Or they can be just as bad as you and say, oh no, don't worry about it, it happened. But try and find someone who will hold you accountable and responsible, if just holding yourself accountable and responsible isn't enough. And now that I've said that, I'm probably going to have to do that on our podcast, much to my chagrin. Now, if you happen to have a lot of priorities and goals and things you want to work on and figure out, the easiest way I've found for handling that is to prioritize them. Now, there's various styles for figuring out what's a higher priority than others, but my preferred method is the trifecta method. The trifecta method, I'm sure someone else has come up with long before me, but this is my rendition of it. You figure out 9 things you want to do today. Now, ideally you do this in the morning or maybe late the night before if you want to plan ahead, but 9 things that you want to have happen tomorrow. Now, figure out 3 of those things that are the highest priority. If this doesn't happen tomorrow, there's going to be a serious problem or a serious repercussion. Like, the deadline is tomorrow, it really needs to get done, or whatever reasoning or explanation you need. Like, top 3, these get done or else. Those are your top priorities. Those get done no matter what. Next is your middle ground priorities. These are ones you would really like to get accomplished. Like, if I finish the top 3 and then I can work on these 3, fantastic. Hopefully I can get to these. I should be able to get to these. If I don't, it's not the end of the world if these 3 don't happen, but it would be great if they did. And then the last tier is, I'd love to just work on this when I get the chance, but these top 6 have to happen first. After these 6 happen, okay, if there's time left and if I really feel like it, I can play with these. But if not, hey, it happens, because life is hectic and chaotic. Anything can happen at any time. Now, an easy way of making this easier, at least for myself, is to kind of set a reward system up alongside this. So your top tier system, say you have 2 points per goal accomplished for a total of 6. Your medium tier points are going to be 5 points each, because you have to finish the top tier ones, which are theoretically going to be a little harder to accomplish, or you really need to power through them. So if you get the next ones done as well, that's fantastic. You deserve a little more reward for accomplishing 6 things in one day, especially since they were priorities. And then the bottom tier can be like 7, 8, 10 points, because you've already done 6 things and now you're doing even more. So you're really powering through the day. And you can set rewards based off of that point system. Like, if I earn 10 points today in whatever combination I can, then I can play my video game for half an hour. I can reward myself, or I can do some other activity or get a piece of cheesecake or something. Or if you're not a fan of cheesecake, say carrot cake or whatever. Or even a cookie. You can never say no to cookies. But yeah, that method I found to be very effective for myself when I actually go through the process of doing it, because usually I do have like 50 things that I want to do. You can't do 50 things in a day. Not unless you skip sleep and have 12 cups of coffee. And even then, you can't do 50 things in a day. I know all too well. But 9, most people can figure out how to do 9 prioritized things over time. And I mean, these don't have to be, it's all or nothing in one day. These can be progressional, like, all right, I want to do 15 minutes of this project today, and that can be a medium tier because it would be great to do it, but if not, okay, tomorrow. Or, okay, I finished my novel, and now it needs to be revised. Well, how about I play with chapter 1 tomorrow? That can be a top or a medium tier. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, if you do 5 pages of that, okay, well, give yourself a couple points because you still worked on it. You still made progress. Maybe not the full amount, but every bit of progress counts and is worth acknowledging. And a lot of the time management and idea creation really does boil down to passion. Everyone has passions because everyone has something or multiple somethings usually that excite them, that engage them, that entertain them. What do you get emotional about? What actually interests you that you can focus on and engage with over time? How can you work those passions into what you're doing or what you want to do, what you want to accomplish? Being able to tie those in together, if they aren't already synchronized, really helps push things along. And being able to say, like for myself, I love writing sci-fi and fantasy, even though I don't do it as much as I like to, but because I have the passion for it, I keep trying to put it in my schedule, in my priority list, like, all right, 15 minutes today, I'm going to play with this because I really do enjoy it. It's a lot of fun, even when it's frustrating or my characters are being stupid and hiding in a corner. They're in space. They're not allowed to hide in a corner. The biggest thing to take away for that would be passion is powerful. You can do a lot if you're passionate or you really care about something. Now, I'm not talking anime levels of passion because anime is a little unrealistic. You're not going to be able to accomplish some of the crazy things they do just because of the power of feelings. But friendship is magic, but in the real world, friendship is also tricky and complicated. And those tricks and complications make that magic hard to access. But yeah, it's useful to be aware of what really motivates you to keep working at stuff, because if you can be aware of that and leverage it and utilize it, take advantage of it, all the better. And that has really been a quick run through of all of the various little tips and tricks that we have for idea creation and time management. We go more in depth in our booklets that we have at our table if you want to peruse those, or if you want to just chat more about that, by all means, because it looks like we still have about 10 minutes, give or take, for 10 minutes for Q&A. So if there's anything else you'd like to delve into or ask, by all means.
I got a question.
Yeah.
How do you get around analysis paralysis? You know, you just keep working at it. It's like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. You know, and it kills time management because it's
yeah. Yeah, that one's very tricky to work around. I've faced that a lot. Sometimes it helps to have a beta reader or someone to critique your work to just go over it. And if you can tell them, like, I want to convey this, or this is what I'm trying to go for, that's ideal to give to a critiquer or a beta reader. So then they know just what you're trying to get out of it. So they can go through it and say, like, well, this part felt a little weird or stunted. Maybe if you tried cleaning this part up or focus on this part. But this part was fantastic. So you can kind of figure out, it's not so much everything needs to be tweaked, but here are some of the weaker points across all of it.
Yeah, we can often be our worst critic, and giving somebody else a chance to look at it can be both, you know, a confidence builder and also to help you focus on the parts that really do need tweaking and aren't just you trying to be a perfectionist.
Yeah, usually, if not always, we are our own worst critics. And surprisingly good at it, unfortunately. Yes?
I'm working on a game, a tabletop game.
Nice.
And one of the things I always face is, you know, I hate my job, so I come home and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to work on this. How do you get over the motivation? Like, because I know I really want. I have parts where I do a lot of work, and then I'll be like gone like 2 weeks of nothing, and then.
I know that feeling way too well because I do my day job, which is not this, and by the time I get home, I'm pretty worn out and burnt out. To then migrate from that to all of this stuff, which I enjoy, to try and work on that is very difficult. The best method I found for myself at the moment is take half an hour once you get home, decompress. Do nothing based off of this, what you're working on, for half an hour once you get home. Have a transition period. Watch a show, play some games, have some decaf tea, or just chat with whoever happens to be around, not about the gaming or whatever you're working on. Just give your brain a little time to decompress. And then I found for myself it's easier to then transfer to something else.
If you don't work a 9 to 5 like I do and you end up working like 7 to 7, then one thing that I've found is that taking my lunch break and turning that into a productivity, creativity time, or taking, you know, at least at my job, they're pretty flexible and no one really watches over my shoulder. So I could take an hour and covertly work on something completely different. And you know, obviously I wouldn't put that on my timesheet, but I do take time off during the day at my work to be creative, and that kind of helps me get through the day as well. So you could try that, or God forbid waking up earlier in the morning, which I can't do.
Also depends on when you have to wake up normally.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I've utilized my lunch breaks on several occasions where it's usually, I am allowed the full hour, but I usually take like 20 to 30 minutes of that hour to focus on like, all right, I really need to figure out this panel outline. Maybe I should focus on this while I have a free moment, and I know no one's going to distract me because they think I'm eating a sandwich.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have any advice or experience about, you know, when you have that piece of writing that you just absolutely love and you know why it belongs in the story,
Yep.
and then your trusted friends who are your criticizers just tear it apart, and the kind of balance of when you let something go and when you dig your heels in and believe in yourself?
For those, I found the best method is figure out why do you love this piece or this part, what really works in it for you, and why do you think it's so valuable to the overall story? And then ask your critiquers and readers, this is why I think it's important or why it should be in here. Why is that not being conveyed to the readers? Where is the disconnect? Because if they can justify why in your story, I really don't think this is going to work because of X, Y, and Z elsewhere throughout, then it might be worth rethinking and tweaking. But if they just say like, I didn't see that because it wasn't conveyed the way they expected you to, then that's that's a different matter of tweaking and revising so that what you want to convey is actually conveyed. But it helps to have that communication between yourself and the readers so you can figure out what's going wrong where. And, huh?
Oh, I was going to say, I hate to talk after CJ every time he talks for this, but we work together as well. I was critiquing a piece once, and there's just this scene that came out of nowhere, had nothing to do with the rest of the story, and it was, you know, I talked to the author, and I'm like, why is this piece here? This piece makes absolutely no sense. And she was like, well, this piece is very important because it foreshadows something that happens in the next book. And so, while that scene was probably important for the overarching storyline, it wasn't as important for the book. And what we had talked about is how to sort of, instead of having like a foreshadowing event like totally in your face, to sort of blend it in to the overall story of that single book, And then when you're reading the second book and it calls back to that, you go, oh, that I do remember this scene. Because the scene that she had written was just so like over the top and had nothing to do with the rest of the story. It was very distracting. But to kind of blend it in and kind of, you know, tweak it, move it to a different scene is often very helpful.
Any last questions before we run out of time? All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. I hope there were some interesting tidbits for you all. And if you do get any questions or ideas later on that you want to chat about, we are in the vendor booth right over there. We'll be there all weekend. So that's it. Enjoy the rest of the convention.